Welcome to American Press Productions, independent political analysis. These are today's top stories. ABC News reports that it has learned from sources that no more indictments are expected from the special counsel. James Comey has commented that he has no idea what Mueller will conclude, but also says that he doesn't care. The Mueller probe has resulted in over 30 indictments so far, but not one of them has been related to Trump's business or campaign associates regarding Russian collusion. But the Democrats in the House have already lined up more investigations of their own, with some screaming for impeachment. Whatever Mueller concludes, events surrounding the Trump presidency have already likely guaranteed it to be one of the most historic in this nation's history, either because Trump is in fact a Russian agent or because the collective level of delusion by U.S. politicians and their supporters have reached clinical levels. Yesterday, the phrase, "There is no God but Allah," was broadcast during the Islamic call to prayer across New Zealand, as part of the government's response to the Christchurch massacre to show solidarity with Muslims. This morning in Canada, a priest was stabbed while delivering Mass. Canadian authorities have yet to release any details about the attacker, and government authorities have yet to comment. It is typical that when an immigrant to the West, especially a Muslim, commits such an attack, their ethnicity and religion is withheld from the public during the early stages of the investigation. But we do look forward to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau making a public statement that he and Canada stands behind Christianity, and for priests and churchgoers to continue to practice their religion without fear. There was also another Islamic terror attack today which killed 23 soldiers in Chad. The terrorists crossed over from neighboring country Niger. Yesterday, Islamic terrorists wounded 2 policemen in India in a grenade attack. In Syria, 5 members of the National Defense Forces were executed by Islamic terrorists. And in Afghanistan, 6 people died and 23 others were wounded in multiple bomb attacks. Police in Germany today arrested 10 jihadists who planned to carry out an Islamic terror attack in Germany by using a truck, guns, and knives to kill as many Germans as possible. But don't let these horrid stories influence your perception of Islam. Remember the phrase, not all Muslims. And now for the tally of white supremacist and white nationalist attacks for today and yesterday, which I'm sure is going to dwarf the Islamic terror attacks. After all, as The Economist reports, quote, "White nationalist terrorism is a global threat," end quote. And even though, as far as New Zealand police can tell, that Brenton Tarrant seems to have acted alone, that he has no ties to any group or organization, this number will... Wait, it's actually 0. There haven't been any attacks the entire week. Meanwhile, for the entire week, there have been 19 Islamic terror attacks across the world in Europe, Africa, and the Middle East, killing 95 people and wounding 71 others. Wait a minute. Are the news media and politicians lying to us? The situation in the Golan Heights continues to develop in a worrying direction. On March 9th of this year, former Vice President Dick Cheney met with Vice President Mike Pence. Cheney grilled Pence over President Trump's decision to pull U.S. troops out of Syria, saying that sent the wrong message to unnamed allies in the region, allies who depend on us for support in military conflicts. On March 10th, Senator Lindsey Graham flew to Israel and met with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in the Golan Heights to speak with the press about Israel's claim of the territory. Graham assured the media that the U.S. stood behind Israel. On March 13th, the U.S. State Department released its annual Global Human Rights Report. The usual description of the Golan Heights had been changed from Israeli-occupied to Israeli-controlled. And now, President Trump has tweeted that he believes it is time for the U.S. to fully recognize Israel's sovereignty over the Golan Heights. Trump said the region is of critical strategic and security importance to Israel. But exactly what does the Golan Heights represent? In 1967, in the closing stages of the Six-Day War, Israel stole the Golan Heights from Syria, kicked out the Syrian citizens from the region, and bulldozed their settlements. In the 60s, the Golan Heights represented 2 critical points for the newly formed state of Israel. The mountainous region was important from a military standpoint because it allowed Israel to see deep into Syrian territory, and it was also the source of a large majority of fresh water for Israel. Since the Israeli military occupation of the region in the 60s, Israel has been content to have nothing more than military control, which ensures both purposes of why Israel stole the territory in the first place. But there was a critical development in 2016. AFEC Oil and Gas discovered potentially billions of barrels worth of oil in the Golan Heights. AFEC is a subsidiary of American company Genie Energy. And who has a monetary stake in Genie Energy? Former Vice President Dick Cheney, among a list of other powerful and extraordinary groups and individuals, former U.S. politicians, government employees, and the Rothschild banking family. The Golan Heights is worth potentially trillions of dollars, and whatever country controls it will be a major player in the world's energy market. The territory belongs to Syria. They have stated that they will not give it up to Israel and have vowed to use every possible means to liberate the Golan Heights from the Israeli military. Iran has publicly stated their support for Syria, both in their decision to retain the land and in a defensive war of aggression by Israel. Turkey is another potential Syrian ally to defend against Israel. But the greatest military power to signal their support for Syria is Russia. Israel has already moved military equipment and personnel towards the Golan Heights, but will they risk an armed conflict to take the oil-rich region? But the real question is, perhaps the only important one, will the United States back Israel in an armed conflict? Will they risk an armed conflict with Syria, Iran, Russia, and possibly Turkey as well, threaten world stability, cause untold death and destruction, all so that Israel can make some money? And if this turns into a global armed conflict, China will find itself in the middle of warring powers. If they are forced to take a side, which side will they take? For that answer, we need look no further than China's oil imports. China imports over 90% of its oil, and at the top of the list, its main supplier is Russia. But the top 10 are a mix of differently aligned world powers. Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Iran, Chinese-controlled assets in Angola, Kuwait, and Oman. The US makes the top 10 list, but only supplies 2.8% of the total. Chinese entry into such a war would likely swing the balance of power into an assured victory for whichever side can guarantee safer and cheaper oil imports. But none of this has the possibility of happening if the US doesn't respond when called by Israel to assist in its war of aggression.